Chapter 26. Sorry. By morning, Sky was still so tired she needed to wrestle herself out of bed. Her tangled hair a testament to her restless sleep, her nightmares filled with repeated scenes of the previous day. What she had done was so out of character even her dreams couldn't reconcile it. Now she was awake, her groggy mind pushed the reminders away. Stealing a child and bashing his father in the face in front of him with all her might wouldn't be something she'd find peace with any time soon. Sky groaned as she got out of bed. Yesterday's tense muscles now seemed frozen in place, and Frankie's rough treatment had left sore spots. She raised the bottom of her shirt to find purple bruises covering the side of her belly. She brushed her hand across the area and winced. Sky looked toward the kitchen, accidentally catching Dylan's eye. He looked at her stomach, and his jaw clenched. He is angry again, but this time, not at me. You okay? Jessie asked in a sleepy voice as he peeked up at her from under his covers. Yes, I'm fine. Just fine. He hung his head. Sorry my dad did that. Sky sat on Jessie's bed beside him. Me too. But it's not your fault, and it will go away quick enough. She smiled and tossed his hair. Hungry? Sky breathed in the aroma of coffee swirling around her with the frantic relief only a true coffee lover experiences. Anticipation built as she stumbled into the kitchen, pleased to find a steaming cup waiting for her at the table. Jessie sat beside her, his head over his cup, inhaling the steam. The men were cranky this morning. The early morning beer they had apparently consumed, if the cans on the sink top were any indication, had not perked them up and they were now on to coffee. Wade leaned against the counter as he drank his while Dylan ruffled through the chip table holding his mug. Wade started it. Given the mood of the room, someone was bound to, and Sky couldn't say it surprised her it was Wade. Not that Dylan couldn't start trouble, as she'd already seen, but he seemed to need a reason first. Both were scowling. Wade did what he wanted when he wanted, and right now, he wanted to get someone riled up. So, what are you going to do now you stole this kid and left his daddy there like that? You gonna go off and be his mommy somewhere? You can't keep this boy safe. Sky looked up at him wide-eyed. Wade's tone made her question if he was berating or teasing or just wanted to know. Her heart thumped. Regardless of his intentions, these were the same thoughts that had raced through her head over and over last night. The ones she'd reproached herself about. Now he'd said them out loud, they sounded even worse. To Sky's utter dismay, a tear escaped her eye and cascaded down her cheek, then another one and another. Not the reaction Wade expected, he took a few steps away from her and pressed his mouth shut. Dylan stopped crinkling chip bags and looked up at the silence. He glanced at his brother, taking in his discomfort before his gaze turned to Sky and her tears. Jessie pulled his gaze from his coffee cup to stare at her. Almost simultaneously, they all looked away and shuffled their feet. Sky sniffed and almost giggled, wondering if their identical reactions were a man thing or a messed-up childhood thing. But it had succeeded in taking her mind off her own problem. Her bracelets jangled as she scrubbed at her cheeks and apologized. It ain't your fault, Dylan said. Leave her alone, Wade. We left him there. But Wade ignored his brother. So, you're sorry you stole him now? No, I'm not sorry, Sky said. Jessie couldn't stay in that environment any longer. What I'm sorry about is that I hurt his father. I have never physically hurt someone before. And I. Another tear ran down Sky's face. Oh boy. I've got to stop. She thought. Her words surprised them. Physical violence had been a constant in their lives, what she'd done hadn't seemed unreasonable to them. I'm a doctor. We help people, not hurt them. She said. Jessie walked over to Sky and with an awkward stance patted her shoulder 3 times. It's okay, Sky. Don't worry. He pride didn't even notice it. His dad used to beat him regular, worse than I got to hear him tell it. Sky felt pride in Jessie for trying to comfort her, but distressed over being one more person in a long line of people to beat up on Frankie. It was more than she could take, and an aching sadness rushed over her. She choked out a thank you before she headed out the front door to let her emotion run unchecked.
Wade watched Sky rush out of the house. He hung his head, sending his brother an apologetic glance. Dylan shook his head at him, scooped something up off the floor, and moved to the front window to see where Sky was going. Picking at her ain't gonna solve anything, Dylan said about the disagreement that had started between them earlier this morning. Before Sky and Jessie had woke, Wade had waved Dylan outside to talk. He knew where Dylan's head was, all one had to do was look at him. Wade had watched for weeks as Dylan sought Sky out whenever they were in town. He'd told his brother over and over nothing was ever going to work out between him and that girl. Now they had come across her on the road needing help, and Dylan was only too eager to do the helping. Wade shook his head again, but not at himself, instead over this crazy situation. There was no way a girl like that was going to go for one of their kind. His brother was only going to get himself hurt. And even though he'd told Dylan that flat out, his brother didn't care. If help was what she needed, then help was what Dylan was going to give her. And when he told Wade he was going to ask her to stay, Wade's brain had felt like something exploded. Girl fever. Wade had developed a couple of full-blown cases of that himself in the past. It wasn't an easy thing to get through. At least, that is what he tried to tell Dylan this morning. Look, I've been there, bro. I really have, Wade had said. It runs red hot at first, but after a while, you won't really care anymore. Then where will we be? We'll be stuck with her. I ain't gonna get tired of her. Dylan replied. Yeah, you will. We all do. Dylan turned toward him, determined as Wade had ever seen him be. It ain't like that. It's different. I can't explain it, but it's something more. Wade's eyes grew. Are you saying? I ain't saying nothing, Dylan turned away. Just forget about it. Wade followed Dylan. Brother, you know she's too soft. If the world turns to what we think it will, she ain't gonna survive. When Dylan whipped around, Wade backed up but said, it won't be her fault. She just ain't up to it. We can help her make it. For how long? We can't be with her all the time, sides we got people on this mountain looking to us now. Wade gave Dylan a hard look. The girl ain't gonna make it. And I don't want to watch you getting all snuggly with her and then. You're just gonna get yourself hurt. Wade pushed a hand through his hair. We've been hurt enough in our lives is all. That's all I gotta say. Good, Dylan replied. 'Cause that's all I'm gonna listen to. Dylan had stormed into the house. Wade waited a few minutes telling himself there was nothing he could do about any of it, then he followed Dylan in. His coffee was waiting.
Sky sat under a large tree in the front yard until her sobs subsided. It had taken a while, the stress of the last few weeks had been building up. Frankie had just been the last straw. Red-eyed and reluctant to return to the kitchen, she took a little walk around the house, curious to see the outside in the daylight. Before she got too far, she heard the front door open and close. She looked up to see Dylan walking toward her. Feelin' better? He asked. Yes. I'm sorry, that isn't like me. I'm not usually a crier, more of a shaker. Sky uttered a small, half-hearted laugh and held up her hands, making them tremble. Yeah, these fell when you ran out. Dylan extended his hand. Sky's bottle of anxiety medication was lying in it. She took it from him. Anxiety. Dylan raised an eyebrow. How's that going with, everything? Sky gave a sharp laugh. I gotta tell you, it's not a real great combo. Dylan chuckled. I wouldn't imagine so. Sky shook the container. I'm going through them like candy. I better get my prescription filled before there's no anything. Her voice broke on the words. Oh man. Just the emotion building up over everything that's been happening and then everything yesterday, I guess. She scanned the forest as she talked to avoid looking at Dylan. Hey, whatever you need to do. He scraped the ground with the heel of his shoe. He's nervous I will tear up again. This is hard for me, but it's like I told Jesse in the truck. Frankie needs to become a better person to have him. You can't treat your children that way. Ever. He needs to change. Sky had always been firm on that conviction. Dylan scoffed. Well, that ain't gonna happen. He is who he is. Earnest in her belief, Sky said, he can change. If he wants to bad enough. Maybe, Dylan said, though his tone was doubtful. But I ain't seen people changing all that much, even when they need to, and now, in all this? Dylan's arm made a broad sweep. Sky sighed. I hope people can, or we're all doomed. I'm doomed. Someone like me needs to do a lot of changing. She wondered if there was more to his question than he was letting on. People can change, Dylan. People change every day. For the good or the bad, it is up to them. Dylan shrugged his shoulder as if he didn't know, but acknowledged her words with a small nod of his head. He pressed his lips together a few times. I don't know. Maybe. His gaze scraped over Sky. You can. You will. Sky giggled. Don't let Tom hear you say that. I'm sure he thinks the exact opposite. He's wrong. Dylan replied. She smiled her appreciation at him. Sky looked toward the woods. The trees stood so tall that their green tops seemed to brush the bright blue of the sky. A gentle wind moved through them, rustling the leaves. The full leaves on the trees subdued the forest's light except for the occasional golden sunbeam that broke through, making its way to the woodland floor. A chipmunk's tail flickered as it raced from one tree to another. It chattered to a neighbor talking about whatever it was that chipmunks talked about. A small flock of birds passed overhead, causing speckled shadows that disappeared somewhere in the canopy. Her gaze tracking the birds, Sky said, I've always loved the forest, even though I haven't spent much time there. I'll teach you. He offered. Sky quickly glanced at Dylan, then away again. That would be nice, but I'm leaving today, as soon as we get my car. Dylan gave her a hard stare before looking off into the distance. She could feel it. Sky looked back at Dylan. Do you think I should be sorry about Frankie? I feel like I should be. I'm not sure I am, but... Dylan snorted, No. You saved that boy. It's what I dreamed of every day when I was a kid. Sky nodded and wrapped her arms around herself. Get over it, Dylan added. The guy don't deserve any kid, let alone a great kid like that. Dylan kicked at the grass again. And don't let Wade get to you. He can be a jackass. Sky had to admit that both statements were true. She shot a look at Dylan from the corner of her eye and smiled. Dylan gave Sky another minute before saying, You're good. Let's go back in. The boys worried. Sky looked back at the cabin. Jesse's small face was pressed against the glass at the corner of the window.